Green is a color I've been so excited to work on ever since I started this project, which hasn't been a long time, but I worked on orange and people seem to really like the idea, so I wanted to keep it going, and I've been thinking about green this entire time, and I'm very excited to do this as my second one because green, I think, is really versatile, and I think it functions in a lot of ways. I think there's some really obvious things about green, just like orange. Green is very natural and it's very organic in some ways. And so I can't ignore that whenever I'm talking about green. But I don't think that's all that there is to green. I think there's a lot to green that is really important to address. And I think it's organic for sure, but I think it's organic more than just in the idea of plants. You have to ignore that insane display there for a second. The brush size got really big really fast. But green is organic in a lot of ways. I'll create something here in a little bit displaying a central circle, but it won't be a perfect circle. It'll be incredibly lopsided, maybe like the worst circle you've ever seen in your life. But I think that's an embodiment of green. Green is a little bit messy. It's a little bit imperfect. It's a little bit rounded. Rounded shapes are very green to me. It like curves, these shapes that kind of flow and don't necessarily follow perfect angles or shapes. And I think it's wonderful because it also works like the color green. Curves can be all kinds of different shapes and still work together. There's less limitations like there are with perfect shapes. There are triangles, there are squares, there are rectangles, there are all kinds of other shapes. If I just keep naming them, it'll never end. But there's limited amount, whereas with curved shapes, there's all kinds. In fact, they're not typically even named based off of their differences because there's so many. In green, it's kind of similar because there's so much versatility with green. There's so many shades of green. And it's weird to say because I think some people think that, well, every color has a certain range and limit and think that they're generally the same, but that's not true. Green actually has a lot more range, specifically in the hue, where people still consider the color to be green. You can lean pretty heavy into the yellows and the turquoise, and as long as you don't tip the balance too much, it's still green, or at least debatably green. And you'll see me play with that a lot. I stick to a lot of just generic green to start, but there are little parts where I start pushing the yellows, start pushing the turquoise or blues, and still end up with what I would call green. It just has so much more range compared to the orange that I was working on. And so I can be a little bit more loose, I can be a little bit less careful, and still get really strong contrast all the way throughout. And I name it as everybody's favorite because I think most people commonly associate blue as being the most favorite color, but I think people like to be a little bit unique and different, and I think green is a color that gets chosen all the time for good reason. It's a fantastic color. It's a color I love, but I think there's so many little bits of green, like these curves that I start doing with these transformations, these changes, where ultimately I think one of the big things that I take away from the meaning of green is life again, or to live again. It's commonly associated with life or nature, but I think there's more to it. I think there is living again, a reborn, or like a rebirth, kind of like a phoenix. And I think that embodies green a lot better. It's not the first time something has come about. It's maybe the second, third, or the way something changes or transforms over time. And I wanted to show that with those squares turning into the circle, or the G turning into the other shade of green on the right side. Another thing I thought was really interesting that kind of just came to me is I think it's the color of a name, the color of a title, which is why in the center I have the name incarnate. I think that a name is green. The idea, the concept of the name is green. Green, I think also carries the sands of time a little bit. Maybe not like physically, but I think when you look back or look forward at a lifespan, I think that is in the shade of green. One I don't mention here, but is definitely true, is mirrors. Mirrors are green, if you didn't know. It's very subtle, but if you put one mirror in front of another mirror and you see that kind of mirror into a mirror kind of dimension thing, it starts getting greener as it goes. But I didn't want to display that here because I think that a reflection is a different shade. And when I get to that color, I'll name it a little bit more explicitly. But it's something I wanted to point out. Green, I think, is also something that comes through for multiple sides, which is why in the corner I have the motivation for good and for the evil. And it's organic and man-made. I think that there's a lot of naturally occurring things that are green, but also a lot of man-made structures or man-made concepts that feign the color green. And so it pushes both sides. I think it's not just inherently good, which I think a lot of people do think green of just being a calming, good color, but it isn't always. It has some negative connotations sometimes, just like all the other colors. I think green is also a little bit of a poppy, attractive color that likes to be looked at, but maybe isn't like attention seeking. And I think of it more of like somebody who smiles every time you see them. They're just always smiling. They're not necessarily trying to attract your attention, but they're trying to convey this little happy, look at me type of idea. And so it's very cutesy in that way. And I add a little cutesy laugh in here at some point. And so I think it embodies green a little bit because it might be a little dark sometimes and a little bit deceiving, but I think in general, it's trying to do that in a way that is appealing and looks good to you. And contrary to what you're hearing right now, I think it's actually a little bit of a deeper sound, like a cello. And so I name that a little bit, and I try to pull some of these ideas into here. And so I start playing with the text a little bit to kind of show that it's not very structured either. It likes to break out of some of that a little bit, and it likes to be jagged, and it likes to be curved, and it likes to just throw you off a little bit based off of what you think might happen next. So I add some of that lightning green, some of that electric green throughout that's nearly yellow, but not quite, and try to emphasize some of this because there's multiple shades to green. It's not just calming. I think overall it is calming, and I think that's why they call those rooms green rooms, because it's meant to calm you before you go on stage. Green, I think, is such a unique color, and I think it's a very special color because of how much we associate with green. It has so many meanings, and it's multifaceted, and it's got a lot of range, and there's so much that green can do, and it evokes a lot of things in us just naturally. In fact, seeing green all over a label of a food product automatically makes you think it's healthier, or maybe that it's environmentally friendly. And it's probably one of the strongest colors in being able to deceive you. And I think it's a little bit mischievous in that way. Overall, green is a beautiful color in my eyes. It's one of my favorites of the non-grayscale colors, we'll put it that way. But it is a lot of fun to work with. I really enjoyed work. I felt like I could do anything, and that just using green really wasn't even a limitation at all. It felt incredibly easy to work with. And with that, I leave you with one quick message of what green really means to me. But thank you for watching. And please consider subscribing.